Afternoon, everyone. I think we should start. There are very many events this afternoon, and we are really having very heavy competition. So I'm actually not sure many more people will make it to our side event. But I would like to welcome you all very much to this side event on traditional Indigenous peoples' knowledge as a viable way for climate change adaptation. This side event has been a cooperation, or is a cooperation, of actually 7 organizations that have been merging our side events, but we have also been working in partnership before this side event, and we have a very good cooperation and solidarity, and I hope this is also something that will be shown in this side event. We have the Congrès Mondial des Amazirs, the World Congress of the Amazigh people, and Pingos Forum from Tanzania and Impedo from Kenya. Those are the 3 indigenous organizations from Africa that are here today. And then we have NEFIN, organization from Nepal, and IPF, an organization from Thailand, the 2 partners from Asia here, and we have IWGIA, the International Work Group for Indigenous Affairs. We're working globally in partnership with indigenous organizations. And I have not spelled out the names of the organizations in order not to lose too much time in my introduction. And I hope all of you will do that on my behalf. So with this, I don't want to lose more time. We have a tight schedule, and I would very much like to give the word to the first presenter. Sorry, Madame Kimaren Nai. She's from the World Congress of the Amazigh people, le Congrès Mondial des Amazirs, and we are really happy that she can be here today. She is the president of the organization, and it's really an honor to have you here. Welcome, and please.
Thank you, merci. Tout d'abord, je m'excuse, je ne parle pas anglais, je parle en français. D'abord, je vous souhaite la bienvenue sur la terre des Amazirs, en Afrique du Nord et à Marrakech. Marrakech, en Amazigh, c'est la terre de Dieu.
First, I apologize because I don't speak in English. I would speak in French. I want to welcome you to this city of Marrakech. In our language, Tamazight, Marrakech means God's land.
Alors, avant de commencer, je vais vous présenter en quelques mots les peuples amazirs de l'Afrique du Nord.
I will present you briefly Amazigh peoples from North Africa.
Les Amazirs sont les peuples autochtones de l'Afrique du Nord qui s'étalent de Siwa en Égypte, en passant par la Libye, la Tunisie, l'Algérie, le Maroc, les îles Canaries, Burkina Faso, le Mali, le Niger, la Mauritanie.
Amazigh people are positioned in different countries, from the Siwa
En Égypte.
in Egypt, the Siwa Oasis in Egypt, and in Libya, Tunisia, Algeria, Canarian Islands, and also Niger and Mauritania and Mali
Niger.
and Niger.
Et les peuples amazirs de l'Afrique du Nord subissent les mêmes injustices et le même déni de la part des gouvernements de l'Afrique du Nord, comme le reste des peuples autochtones du monde.
As other indigenous people over the world, the Amazigh people suffer from injustice and denial of recognition by all the governments in the region.
Alors, en ce qui concerne le thème d'aujourd'hui, le savoir-faire et les savoirs traditionnels amazirs, le savoir traditionnel et la sagesse, les connaissances et les pratiques autochtones amazirs acquises par l'expérience et transmises oralement de génération en génération jouent au fil des ans un rôle important dans l'adaptation au changement climatique.
Traditional knowledge, wisdom, and indigenous practices are acquired by experience and orally transmitted from generation to generation, play an important role in climate change adaptation.
En commençant, tous les croyances des Amazirs, et ils sont en général liés, et la majorité ils sont liés à la nature. Ils vénéraient l'air, les astres, le soleil, la lune, et, qui est adoré par les Touaregs. Ils sacralisaient la montagne, les grottes, les roches, les sources, les rivières. Tout ce qui est lié à la nature était vénéré par les Amazirs.
Amazigh beliefs are linked to nature. No, no, no.
Ah, non, vous revenez parce que lui, il est en train de traduire directement.
It's better. Amazigh beliefs are linked to nature. They venerate air, planets, particularly the sun, and for example, moon was adored by Tuaregs. They think environment is sacred, and mountains, caves, and even big rocks all these places are assimilated to sacred places, to divinities.
La terre pour les Amazirs, c'est leur source de revenus. Ils vivent auprès des montagnes, ils vivent auprès de la terre et de la mer. Et c'est pour cela qu'au fil des années, ils ont appris à s'adapter et à remarquer et à observer de tout près tout changement dans le climat ou dans la nature.
Land is very important for Amazigh. They are attached to land and mountains and sea. So that's why they have been forced to remark any changes in nature.
Et pour cela, ils ont élaboré ce qu'on appelle le calendrier agraire amazigh.
That's why from centuries back, they have elaborated an Amazigh calendar.
Ce calendrier, c'est le premier exemple du savoir-faire amazigh en ce qui concerne la relation des Amazirs avec la terre et le climat.
This calendar is the first example of this relationship between Amazigh and the land and nature.
Ce calendrier est divisé d'après les périodes de l'année. Alors, il est divisé en périodes de sommeil et de labeur, qui est l'automne et l'hiver, le moisson et la récolte, le printemps et l'été. Et les changements climatiques ou floristiques qui ont été, à travers le temps, faits dans la nature, les Amazirs, ils les ont suivis, ils les ont adaptés au calendrier amazigh.
The calendar is divided in two spaces, two different periods. The first one is in autumn what? In autumn and after when we have the time to sow and for working the earth, and then the spring and for harvesting, the harvesting time. Changes in flora and in climate have always been followed with big attention by Amazighs because their main activity focus on land labor, land work.
Je vais essayer de résumer parce que j'ai détaillé, mais je vais essayer de résumer la présentation. Le plus important.
I'm going to try to digesting my presentation.
Alors, le plus important, c'est que le calendrier agraire amazigh se base sur le changement dans le temps. Et c'est pour cela qu'il est divisé, comme je le disais, en deux principaux parties. Et ces parties sont divisées en sous-parties. Les sous-parties, on les appelle les grandes périodes de nuit noire ou ce qu'on peut dire en français, les nuits noires et les nuits blanches. Les nuits noires, c'est celles où la nature n'est pas clémente avec les populations, et les nuits blanches, c'est celles où la nature annonce que le travail de la terre sera possible et qu'on pourra avoir une récolte très importante.
Well, the calendar is divided in two parts, but inside this part there are subparts, and so there is one in the winter time, autumn and winter time. There are subdivisions like the dark nights. Dark nights are not very good for agricultural work, and there are white nights, and these are good announcing work is possible during these seasons.
Et il y a aussi, à partir de ces parties, il y a ce qu'on appelle la porte, la porte de l'année. La porte de l'année, c'est comme la porte de la maison. On rentre d'une chambre vers une autre, on rentre d'une saison vers une autre, période de l'année vers une autre période. Et ces périodes, depuis quelques années, nous avons remarqué qu'il y a un changement dans les périodes. Je donne un simple exemple, par exemple la figue, qui est très cultivée en Kabylie.
We have also another important item is that there are like doors or gates. It's the same when you're in a house and you go from one room to another through a gate. There are also gates into weather, and these important times where you know that weather is changing, and we have remarked there are changes in these gates. For example, for the fig
de Barbarie.
Fig de Barbarie.
Ouais.
It's I don't know the name in English. It's Opuntia, the fig de Barbarie. Opuntia is
C'est un fruit
in
de l'Afrique
Spanish. I
du
know
Nord.
tuna. I don't know in English how you say it. It's barbarian fig. It's a fruit you will find in the streets.
Voilà. Il y a un décalage de 4 semaines pour la période de la récolte de la figue. C'est pour ça que les Amazirs ont décidé de décaler toutes les activités qui viennent après de 4 semaines, comme ça a été observé dans la nature.
For example, in the case of this fruit, the Opuntia fruit is a cactus fruit. We have Amazigh have remarked there is a change of 4 weeks. So now we have moved all activities 4 weeks forward because there is a change in the time of this fruit harvest.
Et nous avons aussi, il y a des lois, par exemple, il y a des périodes où les gens ne peuvent pas ramener leur bétail dans les champs parce que c'est la période où les arbres fruitiers commencent à fleurir. Et cette période, les gens qui osent y aller dans les champs avec leur bétail, ils seront punis par les comités du village, la structure traditionnelle qui gère les villages.
We have also rules concerning the entering of animals into fields who have fruit trees. The harvest of fruit trees. The fruit harvest hasn't been when it's not been done, so there are rules to forbid the animals to enter these fields. If someone's animals enter the field, they will be punished by the local council managing the land.
Et au hiver, par exemple, Inayer, c'est le premier mois de l'année amazigh, c'est la période la plus froide et la plus insupportable dans les montagnes de l'Afrique du Nord. Et c'est pour cette raison qu'il y a une période, on ne touche pas à la terre, on se laisse reposer et on n'a pas le droit d'y aller dans les champs pour une période de 3 semaines.
The first month in the Amazigh calendar is the coldest season in the year. So during this is the worst season in all the Amazigh mountain. So during this season, you don't have the right to enter the land, and this season lasts for 3 weeks.
Il y a aussi une période où après ce froid, quand on commence à travailler la terre, si on travaille la terre cette année, on cultive, on sème des produits, on laisse l'année d'après, on utilisera cette terre pour autre chose, pour donner la chance à la terre d'abord de se reposer, mais aussi pour varier les produits qu'on sème dans la même terre. Tu as compris?
Yes, I think we also have the rule not to sow the same crops in the same plot. So there is a turning. We also we have this rotation.
Voilà, voilà. Et c'est comme ça que chaque période, il est consacré à quelque chose, ou à la semence, ou à la récolte. Et tout ça, tout ce qui il se fait avec la décision de la communauté, et qu'aucun membre de la communauté n'a le droit de faire autre chose que ce qui a été décidé dans des assemblées générales des villages ou de la communauté.
For each time of the year, the local council decides what would be the main agricultural activities that will be done. So there's one time for harvesting, one time to prepare the land, the soil, etc. And this is decided by the local council.
Il y a aussi ce qu'on appelle Anzar. Anzar, c'est le dieu du ciel, des eaux et des rivières et des mers. Anzar, aujourd'hui, c'est devenu une fête ou une cérémonie qu'on fait, la fiancée de Anzar. À chaque fois que les vieilles du village remarquent qu'il y a la sécheresse qui arrive, ils décident d'organiser ce qu'on appelle Anzar, la cérémonie de la fiancée de la pluie, de Dieu de la pluie.
We have also Anzar. Anzar is heaven's god and also rivers, etc. And rain. And this has become a kind of right when old ladies in towns, in villages, when old ladies remark there's a dry season coming, they prepare this rite. It's a feast, and everyone sing songs for Anzar God.
Et cette occasion, c'est une occasion que les vieilles du village utilisent pour préparer des repas et ramasser et récolter des aliments auprès des gens pour les distribuer équitablement à tous les gens du village. C'est une manière de faire face à la sécheresse et d'aider les gens, les pauvres de la communauté. Mais aussi, c'est une occasion aussi pour les vieilles d'apprendre aux jeunes générations le respect de l'eau, qui est un élément très important dans notre vie.
When we have this Anzar celebration, it's the occasion to distribute food from rich people to poorer people. So it is a way to prepare poor people facing the drought season. But also it's a way for old ladies in villages to teach younger generations respect for war.
Et les vieilles disaient aux jeunes, Samour, c'est la terre qui va naître, les ancêtres ont besoin de toi, il a besoin de ses enfants. C'est une honte de rester silencieux et spectateur sur la disparition de notre richesse et notre patrimoine. La perte de nos valeurs ancestrales, ta différence te vaudra la malédiction. Reprends-toi, noble Amazir. Samour te convoque, Samour a besoin de toi. Ouais.
There's a prayer old ladies say at these occasions. They say, Tamort, the land which saw you be born, your ancestors need you. They need their children. It's a shame to remain silent and indifferent on the disparition of our richness, the loss of our ancient values. If you remain indifferent, you would be damned. I don't know how to say this word. Sorry. No. come on, noble Amazic, Tamurt is calling you, Tamurt needs you.
Il y a aussi la fête du printemps. La fête de printemps, c'est la fête de la vie, c'est la renaissance. Et c'est pour cela, comme vous voyez dans les images qui sont sur la présentation, à chaque fête du printemps, tous les villageois et les femmes et les enfants sont à l'honneur avec la nature. On sort dans les champs pour apprendre aux enfants et générations toujours futures et notre relation avec la terre-mère. Et on leur apprend aussi à connaître toutes les richesses que notre terre nous donne. Et d'abord, c'est une fête joyeuse, mais aussi c'est une fête de transmission du savoir traditionnel.
So the spring celebration, as you see in the pictures, the spring celebration is a very joyous celebration, and we take advantage of this celebration not only to celebrate and be happy with what the earth is giving us, but also it's the occasion to transmit knowledge from the older generation to younger generation.
Il y a aussi l'architecture amazigh. L'architecture amazigh, la construction des maisons amazigh, ils sont d'abord écologiques, ils respectent l'environnement et la consommation d'énergie. Tous les produits utilisés pour la construction des maisons viennent de la terre et c'est des produits naturels. Et à la fin de la vie de ces maisons, les produits reviennent à la terre. On perd absolument rien.
So there's also the Amazigh construction techniques. Amazigh architecture is very ecologic. All products come from the earth and they go back to earth.
Ces maisons en été ils sont fraîches, en hiver elles sont chaudes.
During summer, these houses are fresh and they are hot in the winter.
Il y a aussi ce qu'on appelle tiwisin, la solidarité active. C'est une des pratiques ancestrales des peuples amazirs et c'est la plus importante. Tout ce qui se fait dans la communauté se fait en groupe et tout le monde doit participer.
There is also Tiwizi. Tiwizi is active solidarity. It's many things are done in communities in solidarity, collective actions, and everyone must participate.
Pour les travaux agraires, pour la moisson, pour le nettoyage des rivières, des canalisations d'eau, pour la fortification des barrages ou pour les sources d'eau.
For fortificating dams, for cleaning water channels, for harvesting, all these activities are done collectively.
Par exemple, je vous donne un exemple de mon village. Notre village se situe en bas de la montagne et avec les moyens et les jeunes du village, nous avons pu acheminer l'eau de la montagne très loin jusqu'au village et construire 35 fontaines. Les 3 villages où la conduite passe, on leur a donné de l'eau et c'est comme ça qu'aujourd'hui, nous n'avons pas le problème d'eau. C'est grâce aux moyens et la solidarité des villageois que nous avons de l'eau potable à l'intérieur de la maison, en plus de 35 fontaines dans le village.
For example, in my own village, it's situated
Au pied de la montagne.
below the mountain, and we have with young people in my village, we have worked together, and so we brought water from very high in the mountain. And now we have 35 fountains in the village and also water inside the houses because of this collective work.
Et je reviens à nos recommandations. La mondialisation et la négation, le dîner menacent notre culture et nos connaissances traditionnelles de se dissiper ou de disparaître.
I will finish with my recommendations. Globalization and denial menace our culture, our traditional knowledge is under menace and could disappear.
Le savoir-faire traditionnel doit être analysé, soutenu et intégré dans la recherche scientifique.
Traditional knowledge must be analyzed, supported and integrated into scientific research.
Les Amazirs, comme tous les peuples autochtones du monde, ont besoin de soutien pour s'adapter au changement climatique. Il demeure au moins qu'ils ont aussi des compétences à offrir en matière d'adaptation grâce à leurs mécanismes traditionnels.
Amazighs, like all indigenous people, need support to adapt to climate change. However, they have also expertise to offer in adaptation matters thanks to the traditional mechanisms.
Malgré que la plupart des peuples autochtones ont développé une connaissance intime de leur environnement et observent avec inquiétude le changement de leur écosystème, les pouvoirs politiques mis en place ne respectent pas leur mode de vie et leur savoir-faire. Et pour cela, nous considérons qu'il est important de donner le pouvoir de gérer eux-mêmes leur terrain et avoir un droit de regard sur l'utilisation et la gestion de leur territoire afin de les préserver.
As indigenous people have developed an very good knowledge of their environment, and they are watching climate changes in their ecosystems, national policies don't respect their way of life and their knowledge. Consider it is important to give them power to manage their own territories and have a say about managing of these territories in order to preserve them.
Aussi, il faut créer une base, on propose de créer une base de données mondiale du savoir-faire traditionnel des peuples autochtones et de la mettre à la disposition de toute l'humanité en protégeant ce savoir-faire.
We propose to create a database about traditional knowledge of indigenous people and to offer it to all humankind, but protecting it.
La pérennisation des connaissances traditionnelles et la garantie de leur transmission et aux générations futures.
It is important to guarantee traditional knowledge and its transmission to future generations.
La sensibilisation et la formation aussi la société civile autochtone.
We think sensitivation or
Sensibilisation.
with sensibilization and formation could reinforce strengthen civil society.
Je vous remercie. Je suis désolée pour ça a été long, mais je suis désolée, je connais pas l'anglais.
Thank you. It's long, but I don't speak English. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Camila. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. And for the translation. I will go immediately to the next speaker, which is Mr. Kitisak Ratanakaran Changsoi. I hope I have pronounced that right. Kitisak is the chair of the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, a regional organization of representing indigenous peoples in Asia. Assignment. Please, Kitisak.
Okay, thank you very much, Kathleen. I will be brief. The issue that I'm going to share with you is about the holistic land use and livelihoods system of the indigenous people, way for climate change adaptation. This one actually is one of the case study that we jointly conducted with the communities in one of the community in Thailand. The name is Hin Lad Nai. As you can see, the Hin Lad Nai is located in the northern part of Thailand, Myanmar. It's in Chiang Rai province. This community belong to, in the local language, they call themselves Pakayo people, but you know in Kalen, it's quite small community is only households, yeah, and 35 families, 107 people, yeah, and they are consist of 5 clans. This community was established in mid 1900s, and yeah, before they moved to the recent location, they have been moving several places, yeah, until they settled down in 1966. Just to give you a little bit background about this community was planted by the government to the logging company in 1986, and what the problem was, the community said that there are only 10% of the big trees, yeah, that remain in the community, and this have a lot of impact, yeah, to the communities. That's what they said. After the forest concessions, yeah, they said that the water spring dry up. They also have a lot of impact to the aquatic lives, and also many kind of animals also disappearing, and they also causes dryness and also a lot of wildfires in the summertime. And yeah, in addition to this, the communities also was blamed for destroying of the forest because they are practicing the rotational farming. And people at the villages also heard that at that time, yeah, the government also have a plan to relocate them out of the forest. Yeah. This issue actually posed a lot of grave concern to the communities, and the community also try to reorganize themselves, how to improve and show and tell the outside people that they can live coexist with the nature, yeah, and the environment. That's what they are trying to revive the culture and to strengthen themselves. Yeah. The background of the community, and based on that, the culture. So they try to revive the culture and worldview that they have been practicing for hundreds of years. The worldviews of the communities, they said that everything starts from the forest and ends with the forest. So if there's no forest, yeah, there is no life for them. Yeah, this also refers to the interdependencies between human being and nature. You can see the trees there. It's actually the trees that they tie the umbilical cord of the newborn baby, yeah, to this tree. And that's to show the connection of the human being with the tree. And yeah, in addition to this, the community also refers the forest to it's like habitat for flora and fauna, and also means for soil conservation, source to maintain healthy air and water in the area. And the most important thing is the forest is the dwelling place of the different types of spirits, including their own spirits and their ancestors. Therefore, if all the forest is destroyed, so it's not only the resources will disappear, but all the spirits will also be gone, and this will mark the end of all lives. Yeah, that's the worldview of the communities. Yeah, based on this belief and worldview, the community also has classified their land use categories, and this land use practice and livelihood system also strongly support one another, and therefore they are interlinked and inseparable. Yeah, you can see that this kind of the land use practiced by the community is not a clear-cut division, yeah, but is happen everywhere. You can see in this map, the yellow color actually is the rotational farming practiced by the community, and the dark yellow, actually that one is the mixed farm of the community, and the pink one is the paddy field. And then there's the small dot is the settlement area of the community. Yeah. So the one that you can see, I don't know if you can point, not here. Yeah. Yeah, in the middle, that the Hin Lad Nai communities that I mentioned, and the other one is also the nearby communities who share the same resources, yeah, in this area. Yeah, based on this land use practice of the communities, their livelihoods also linked to this land use system. And of course, they also not just live on the subsistence economy, that they also are collecting some kind of the forest products, and also from the mixed farm that they sell to the market. They also live on the commercial. I just give you two main livelihoods that communities are practicing. The first one is the rice cultivation. There are two types of rice cultivation. The first one is the rotational farming, is dry rice paddy, and another one is wet rice paddy or terrace paddy, that practiced by the communities. The question is why the community is practicing both types of rice cultivation. The answer is that if you grow rice in the west paddy, you get only rice. In the rotational farming, you get not just rice, you get also a lot of vegetables. That can people can eat almost all year round. That's the answer to this kind of cultivation. That's why the communities also try to maintain both systems. You can see not just the rice in the growing season, they can also get some. You know what is this? It's eels. Quite delicious. Another one is mixed farm land. So in the communities, they also have a lot of mixed farmland there. So the mixed farmland actually, you can call it like agroforestry. It's actually look like forest. So they also keep some of the like tea trees there, and also the outer fruit trees, and they also have bamboos. They also have other crops that they plant in that garden, and some trees they also put you can see the small box down there that they keep the bees in under the tree, that also to get some honey in the dry season. The mixed farm that the community are practicing, and this just to give you some information about the income that the communities they get from selling the product from the mixed garden, like white tea and seasoned food, herbs, and also honey and mushroom, and also bamboo shoot. I think that bamboo shoot is also generate a lot of income to the communities. And actually the mixed farming that practiced by the community address the three main issues. The first one, the mixed farming also generate income without creating ecological pressure. As you can see, it look like forest, but villagers just go and collect it and sell to the market. And another one is this kind of practice is to control opening the new forest area. So it's enough for communities. They can maintain, they can correct the products from the mixed farming, and they also have rights from the West Paddy field and also the rotational farming. And the last one is to enhancing the resiliency and livelihoods, diversification and food security of the community. You can see practice is quite useful for the community. And if you look at the subsistence of the community, 90% of the food that the community have is come from the production and also the natural resources. Only 8% of food that community buying from the outside market. You can see this how a community can sustain and live in harmony with the forest and nature. Just to conclude that this kind of practice is by the community is complex, very complex, and each type of land use each type of land is also used in a different ways, and it's also a source of different types of foods. As I already mentioned earlier, that so people can get foods from different sources, like from paddy field, from the rotational farming, also from the mixed garden, and this kind of practice also requires the specific knowledge of the communities to manage and take care of each kind of land use, and demonstrate the holistic approach that's practiced by the communities. And last one, I think that this one also linked with the issues that we discussed at the moment under the Paris Agreement, the Article 7, Paragraph 5. Yeah. That's the importance of the traditional knowledge and knowledge of indigenous people when they are doing the adaptation action at the country level. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kitisak, for this very good presentation of the holistic basis of indigenous people's livelihoods and the sustainable livelihoods. I think both presentations have shown that very good. Thank you. I will now give the floor to Mr. Porokwa, Edward Porokwa from Pingos Forum. Pingos Forum is an organization in Tanzania, indigenous organization. But Pingos Forum is also the host of an Indigenous Peoples Network in Tanzania with over 50 indigenous member organizations.
Thank you, Catherine. My presentation is on knowledge of indigenous people in addressing climate change and adaptation strategies. And particularly, I'll be talking of indigenous people of East Africa, and particularly the pastoralists. In Africa and in East Africa, indigenous people are either pastoralists or hunter-gatherers, and those are the ones who dominate the whole indigenous people community. And I'm from Tanzania, so most of my examples will be coming from Tanzania, and particularly from the Maasai community that I belong to. When you talk of pastoralists in East Africa, or probably in most of the places that they are available, you talk of some of the very important strategies that they use to mitigate climate change and adapt to the situation and the variability of climate in the areas. So when you talk of pastoralism, you have to talk about one of the very important pillars of their livelihood, which is mobility, which is a mechanism that they use to enhance variability and their resilience. In order also to address some of the adaptation and mitigation actions, indigenous people in East Africa, particularly pastorally, keep different types of livestock breeds and different sizes on the environment and the changes that appear in their community. They also work with interaction with different wildlife. So it is not where indigenous people are found is the same location where we find the conservation areas. It is not by default, it is because they've been able to protect those wildlife from time immemorial. You have the indigenous knowledge is so much entrenched into understanding of different plants and protecting different species that they believe are attractive to the rain and can sustain the kind of environment that they have. They have very close, the vegetation cover and the climate itself has a close relationship with the livelihood of indigenous people. Based on them living in that have variable environment, indigenous people have their own land use, which is very much dependent on seasons and which very much depend on allowing the ecosystem to take its place and allowing the generation of the vegetation and allowing avoidance of diseases for protecting their stock. They also have mechanisms that address invasive species that kill other vegetation. So all these mechanisms of indigenous people are so much entrenched into their indigenous knowledge, and is not really documented and researched through the scientific means. They are the custodian of that knowledge, and that is very important to the localities that they are staying. But now, with the coming of states, there's been a very big interruption to the livelihood of indigenous people. That is when the government's policies, not only in Tanzania or Kenya or in East Africa, that came as if they're coming to a vacuum, as if there was nothing that was happening, as if people were not living there, as if the environment was protecting itself, as if life was not there before the coming of the states, the modern states. All this ended up in lack of recognition of the right of indigenous people in different parts, and negative, very negative perception about the livelihood, pastoralism. This is mainly because of the mainstream thinking. Indigenous people are few, pastoralists are few, and mostly many of the East African community are agriculture or farming community. So there's a very negative perception about pastoralism itself as a livelihood and indigenous people as a community that have been protecting environment. Also, with the coming of modern science and science from the West, the modern conservation ideas came in, and now we start thinking of conservation without people and trying to separate indigenous people with their environment, trying to protect areas as if they were not protected. And that is really where the problems of indigenous people start to appear. And also, we start coming with all concepts of investment in natural resource sector. We need dominance by the on land that belongs to indigenous people. So that is another issue that really is a challenge to indigenous people. So you can see now that there are challenges that come as a result of non-involvement of indigenous people in mitigation and adaptation mechanisms, which are so much entrenched and associated with perception in history, and that result into formulation of policies. There are those that associate with coexistence of indigenous people or pastoralists with other farming community. We have challenges related to associated with protected areas and natural resource management practices, and those associated with land investment that come with land speculation, environment, and climate change mitigation strategy. Because for indigenous people, it is not only the climate change that is affecting them, that are made to protect or to address climate change affect them equally as climate change. So you find people are affected by the interventions that we are making here in Marrakesh and other places than the climate change itself. The decisions that we make here affect people than the climate change itself. We agree that there is a serious problem of climate change, but what we are doing here is more impacting on the livelihood of indigenous people than climate change itself. Because that is when we have very serious issues of human rights, when we want to protect areas and we displace people based on the policies and mentalities in terms of climate change. As a result of what we are doing here, or as a result of what states do here, in mitigating climate change, we have laws that are created back home. We have programs that we support to governments that result into a vision of people, that increase conflict between indigenous people and other users. I mentioned a lot of places that we have conflict and displacement in Tanzania as a result of initiatives trying to protect environment. We have eviction of indigenous people in their land in different parts of the country, resulting into violations of human rights and many other issues that happen, including dispossession and lawful arrest of indigenous people. When we create protected areas, loss of livestock and increased poverty among the community, violation of human and women rights, increased poverty in many We have a lot of civil cases resulting into this gist of trying to protect environment, but without involving people, and trying to separate indigenous people with their land. The solution to all these problems is an inclusive process that involves adaptation and mitigation and involvement of indigenous people in all the actions that we are trying to do that touches their right. They have their own knowledge, as I said earlier. They have their own mitigation strategies. They have their own adaptation mechanisms. We need to learn on how they are doing. We don't just come, not being there, and as if that area is, they are the cause of climate change and they are the cause of whatever is happening on the ground. We have to get them involved. We have to make them participate in the decisions that we are making, and take into account the indigenous knowledge and integrate the indigenous knowledge into the policy making processes. We have to take into account that they have their own land uses based on what was happening on their land, and we need to look at the relevance of what they're doing to ensure that the livelihood of indigenous people continue to happen and the environment is protected.
Thank you very much, Edward. Thank you so clearly this link from the traditional knowledge to the human rights and back. I think that has been very, very clear in your presentation. Thank you. I would like to give the word now to Mr. Joseph Ole Simel from MPIDO in Kenya. MPIDO is an indigenous organization in Kenya, but as Pingo's Forum, MPIDO is also the host of an Indigenous Peoples Network in Kenya. And the network has currently 25 member organizations, I believe. Welcome, Joseph.
Well, thank you, Catherine, and thank you, my friends and colleagues. I'll be very brief because I believe this session also need to give us some time to interaction between the speakers and the audience. And for that reason, I realize we have already limited time remaining. Climate change more felt at the household level, and that's a reality. And household level, from where I come from, is managed and run by women. Before modernization, traditional knowledge has been a pillar of our own survival. But the Western influence across and intimidated and even crushed that traditional knowledge of many indigenous peoples. So by the arrival of the challenges of climate change, that knowledge is already shaken and already crushed to a large extent in many areas. Indigenous traditional knowledge, and particularly by women as custodians, has assisted us to cope and manage climate change over years. Unfortunately, when you come to Paris and you go to the capital cities, either in Dar es Salaam or Nairobi, that knowledge is not respected. Knowledge is not recognized. That knowledge, according to some, is backward, is primitive, is a way that must be done away with. But they don't come up with an alternative. They don't come up with an alternative. So this meeting in Morocco, the question is, how do we actualize the broader principles in the Paris Agreement on Traditional Knowledge at the local level? How do we, women particularly, who are not seen in policy framework, both at the national and the global level, how they become critical and major players of climate change, intervention, mitigation, adaptation, and so on? How do we, the broader principles of the Paris Agreement come to traditional knowledge, become light to the reality of the people on the ground? How do we turn our attitude? How do we change our attitude and belief and practices to acknowledge that indigenous people play a critical role when to come to climate change at the ground level? And I think that's a question. And I think that is a reality that we need to face on as we engage with the parties. Climate change intervention is driven by the states. And to a large extent, from where I come from, the state is less democratic. The state has, for a long time, never created a space for us to engage as indigenous peoples. And that's why rights have been abused and violated over time. The table belongs to a small clique of people who do not understand where we come from. They don't understand our vision. They don't understand our dreams. They don't understand our agenda for tomorrow. They don't understand the agenda for the environment for tomorrow. They only think about business. They only think about business deals. They only think about trade. But life is not just about trade. Environment is not just about trade. There's so much which is beyond trade. And that's the reality. So as we continue to deal with the reality of today and tomorrow, indigenous traditional knowledge, and particularly women, must be brought on the center of the discussion. Any program, any policy, both global and national, must then integrate, specifically for women, part of that decision. Once you exclude women from decision making, once you exclude a particular segment of the society from participation, whatever you propose, whatever you implement is likely not to give you the requirement results. The results are not going to be sustainable, and the results are not going to be beneficial to the majority of the society who need it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joseph, for being so brief. And thank you very much for bringing the local communities and the women into the center of our discussions. I'm now giving the word to our last presenter, Mr. Tunga.
Okay, thank you very much, Catherine. I will be also very brief. My name is Tunga Rai. I belong to Rai indigenous community of Nepal, originally from the mountains of the eastern part of the country. And I work with Nepal Federation of Indigenous Nationalities, which is the only umbrella organization of indigenous peoples organization in Nepal. Yes, we have heard from Amajis, Karen, and Masai, indigenous people of different part of the world. And now we have realized where the climate change is happening and where the climate change action and Paris Agreement has to be implemented. So now we have come to the point to realize that now it's time for implementation and time for action. So I would say now it's time for the paradigm shift. We have to shift the paradigm from welfare to the rights of indigenous peoples. Indigenous knowledge and indigenous practices. I tell you briefly why we have to shift the paradigm of climate change action. You have heard from different parts of the world, and also I will give you a very brief examples how this village you can see in the picture of Nepal has been adapting and coping with the changing environment in such a high altitude, rain shadow, a desert, because there is an interplay of indigenous practice and knowledge between culture and environment that produces and reproduces the, the social harmony, culture, political and environmental meaning and knowledge within indigenous communities. You can see the picture how this lady, this woman from my own community processed a fiber from that little wild nettle and they make a thread, and then she weaves herself at home, and then and they make such beautiful dresses. You can see the women's wearing, and they are celebrating their own festival, worshiping nature. Likewise, you can also see another, the green barley field that's not like in the rainforest area. It's in a high altitude desert, but that is possible only through the indigenous knowledge and indigenous practice of harnessing water from the melting snow coming from the mountain. So such examples that has a lot of evidences that now we have to recognize the rights of indigenous peoples. We have also some basis for that. And International Indigenous Peoples Forum on Climate Change, which is the Global Indigenous Peoples Caucus on Climate Change, has also pointed out those bases and demanded for the action while implementing climate change actions. For example, if we see Paris Agreement and the preamble of the agreement has reference to the rights of indigenous peoples, and Article 7.5 Article 7 paragraph 5 of the agreement has provision for the knowledge of indigenous people. Likewise, Article 5 under mitigation paragraph 2 has recognized non-carbon benefit, which has a lot of relationship with indigenous people's value. And also, if you see the Article 8, which is loss and damage, and paragraph 4, the agreement mentions about non-economic loss and damage, but also we indigenous people have a lot of our concerns and issues regarding intangible cultural heritage and our ancestral heritages. Likewise, 15, and also it talks about the compliance of the agreement, or the compliance of the provisions of the agreement with all the elements. So it has laid down some basis for us to ensure indigenous people's right. And if you go back to the COP16, and then we have Cancun Safeguard on Red Plus, that includes United Nations declarations on the rights of indigenous peoples, and also ILO Convention number 169. So we have a lot of bases. And also we as indigenous people are trying to claim these in different approaches. We try to comply our rights within the Paris Agreement and within the COP decisions. If that really doesn't work at our country level or at any level, we have also another approaches. We have national and international instrument of indigenous people's rights, and also we have UN guiding principle and business and human rights. So these are just examples how we can ensure our rights and how you guys can support us to ensure our rights in climate change action. And okay, so having those bases in place, also there are some indicative rooms or some potential rooms where we can respect and fulfill our rights, indigenous people's rights. There are some examples in my slides, which is under mitigation, I already said non-carbon benefits, under adaptation, indigenous knowledge, capacity building, loss and damage, because in loss and damage, there is a reference to non-economic loss and damage, but for the indigenous peoples, intangible capitals, cultures, and our heritage, these are very much vulnerable to climate change actions and also climate change impact itself. So it has a twofold of impact. In the same way, countries have to submit nationally determined contribution, but we have a lot of suspicion and fear about determined contribution because it has a lot of risks being a false solution. We have experiences many countries and in many communities. likewise, the safeguard information system and the global stock take. Global stock take should not be just focused on the the overall long-term goal of the agreement, but also it should take account of each and every element and the article of the agreement. So those are the areas where we can promote respect and also fulfill our rights. So that should go at different level, global level, national level, and also at the community level. There are many ways and many approaches we have to demand, and we have to claim our rights as indigenous peoples, and also as our allies can support us to secure our rights in climate change.
Thank you very much, Tunga. Thank you for taking us so well through the Paris Agreement and showing us some possibilities and options. I think that this side event, these presentations have very well shown how traditional knowledge cannot be delinked from the human rights and the indigenous people's rights in the preamble of the Paris Agreement. And these rights, of course, include indigenous people's rights to lands and territories and natural resources. And as Tunga also mentioned, the UNDRIP, these rights are actually in the UNDRIP in the Article 26, so you can write down in 26. I also think that, as Edward said, the non-involvement of indigenous peoples in climate change actions can really lead to human rights violations, and also to conflicts. And ultimately, this is really a big risk to climate change actions and to mitigation action and adaptation actions. And thirdly, I think also that the presentations have very well shown that there is a need for policy coherence. We really need to look at the existing human rights obligations that states actually have. And I mean, talking about human rights in a climate change context is not inventing something new. It's basically looking at policy coherence. So I think these are 3 points that I took from the presentations, and I would like to open the floor now. Maybe we can take 3 questions, and yeah, anyone wants to start?
Buju Anin Tanse, Bonkum Gizikwe. I'm just saying, introducing myself in my traditional language, Anishinaabe in North America, Canada. I have one kind of question or comment question. I liked what I can't remember what your name, but or the one where you're talking about the forest has spirits, and the fact that preserving the land is integral to spirituality and culture, and that we have rights around that, and how they are supporting of that. In my culture, water has a spirit, and therefore we're water protectors, and is tied to water, and water is life. And so I find very interesting that it was very similar in that the forest is life, and the forest has spirits. So that's just one comment that I noticed, that there was some similarities in there. My second one, I really wanted to ask about, how is the UN DRIP being ratified within your own countries? And if they are, how are they being implemented? And are they being introduced in the NDCs within your country?
Okay, my name is Maria Fernandez Jimenez, and I'm a researcher, and several of you mentioned the need to, well, there's a point of clarification. I wanted to understand whether those of you who mentioned scientific research in relation to traditional knowledge, that traditional knowledge should be studied by scientists, or rather that traditional knowledge and science should both be incorporated and considered in adaptation.
I think we have one last question in the back.
Excuse me, I cannot speak English. I speak Thai and Ajahn Chupini translator. Okay, sorry. ค่ะก็สวัสดีทุกท่านนะคะดิฉันชื่อมีจูนะคะเป็นชนเผ่าอาขาจากประเทศไทยมาจาก AIPP นะคะค่ะก็จากระดับพื้นที่ชุมชนนะคะแล้วก็ระดับก็นานาชาติแบบนี้ดิฉันก็ดีใจมากที่ได้มาร่วมเวทีแบบนี้นะคะแต่ว่าฟังท่านวิทยากร 4-5 ท่านที่อยู่บนเวทีทั้งระดับชาติแล้วก็ระดับท้องถิ่นเนี่ยรู้สึกว่าเราพูดปัญหาเหมือนกันเลยนะคะไม่มีอะไรต่างกันเลยทั้งที่อยู่คนละทวีปแต่เหมือนกันหมดเลย
Good afternoon. My name is Miju, representing the Akha people from the northern part of Thailand. So I'm glad that I have a chance to come to this conference. But what I observed is that the representatives presented the similar problems that they share together.
ค่ะแล้วก็ตอนนี้เราพูดแต่ปัญหารู้สึกว่าเรามีปัญหาเหมือนกันแต่ในระดับชาติแล้วก็นานาชาติเนี่ยอย่างพวกเรามารวมตัวกันนี่คนบอกว่ารัฐไม่ยอมรับสิ่งที่เรามีองค์ความรู้ภูมิปัญญาของท้องถิ่นแล้วก็บรรพบุรุษเราจะอยู่เฉยแบบนี้ไหมว่าไม่ยอมรับแล้วก็เราจะอยู่แบบนี้ไหมหรือเราจะผลักดันให้ถึงที่สุดเพราะว่าในเมื่อเขาไม่ยอมรับในสิ่งที่เรามีดีแล้วเราจะทำยังไงต่อก็เลยอยากจะชวนทุกคนว่าเราต้องเดินไปข้างหน้าพร้อมกันผนึกกำลังกันตั้งแต่ระดับท้องถิ่นแล้วก็ระดับชาติแล้วก็นานาชาติไม่อย่างนั้นแล้วเนี่ยเรารู้สึกเรียกร้องนะคะแต่ว่าเขาไม่ฟังเนี่ยเราต้องคิดหนทางมีวิธีการอย่างใดอย่างหนึ่งแบบไหนร่วมกันหรือเปล่านะคะอยากให้ช่วยหาทางออกร่วมกันนะคะ
So the problems that we share together, it takes place at the national and international levels. That the governments do not recognize our rights, our indigenous people's right, and what can we do in order to push forward about our rights to land and territory, ancestral land and territory. I would like to encourage everyone here to join hands together in order to send our message to the authorities and the states. There must be some way to do in order to solve these chronic problems.
ค่ะดิฉันตอนนี้อายุ48นะคะหมู่บ้านของดิฉันถูกไล่ที่จากหน่วยงานของรัฐตั้งแต่อายุ9 ขวบแล้วตอนนี้48ยังต่อสู้กันอยู่นะคะเพราะฉะนั้นปัญหาตั้งแต่ที่ดิฉันลืมตาดูโลกจนถึงทุกวันนี้ก็เหมือนเดิมไม่มีอะไรเปลี่ยนและมีแต่หนักขึ้นเรื่อยๆเพราะฉะนั้นคิดว่าในฐานะที่พวกเราชนเผ่าพื้นเมืองอยู่ทั่วโลกเนี่ยเราจะรวมพลังกันเพื่อที่จะสู้ต่อไปข้างหน้าแล้วมีอนุสัญญาตั้งหลากหลายฉบับนะคะระดับนานาชาติอันนี้มาใช้เป็นประโยชน์ให้มีคุณค่ามากที่สุดแล้วก็เป็นพลังมากที่สุดได้อย่างไรขอบคุณค่ะ
I've heard this kind of problems since I was only 9 years old, and now I am 48, but still facing the same problem and even more serious. So maybe this is time that we can help together. Thank you.
Sorry, we only have one microphone, so this is a little bit exercising here. I think the questions were to all of you, so start with Edward on the far end there.
Yes, the first question on the on relation to ratification of UN DRIP. And I think that is a very important question that you have asked. That many of the African countries, except Congo, do not recognize indigenous people and do not have any legislation that protect indigenous people. The level of protecting the right of indigenous people differ from country to countries. So many of the countries as well, including my country, have signed the declaration in 1997. But respect to the rights of indigenous people is not one of the issues that is taken into account by our states. So that is what I can say about it. And also, you also understand that of the international institution, including the World Bank and others, have policies on indigenous people. But you can also find many of our government trying to find way out of implementing projects, including those that are related to protection of climate and issues of climate change. They try to find a way of going behind that. And you can see now Tanzania, for example, being the first country globally be given an opt-out by the World Bank to implement projects that might affect indigenous people, the Sagot project. So you can see lack of respect to the right of indigenous people by many of the African states and many other governments globally. So that is what I can say, that in fact, our countries don't recognize indigenous people. So it is very difficult for us to address these issues rather than trying to influence at global level the recognition of the rights of indigenous people.
Okay, really brief. In Thailand, actually, we also, actually last year, we also joined one of the initiatives that initiated by ILO, IWGIA, supported by AIPP, I think, and FPP. They conduct this kind of assessment, how the UN DRIP after the 2007 and how it's going to be implemented on the ground. So Thailand also part of that pilot country to do the assessment. From the outcome that we receive, actually, some of the issues like education and this kind of culture is more or less the government to this kind of aspect because it's not difficult issues. But when you're talking about the other issues, right, land issues, kind of issue is still difficult. The states still not yet really recognizing this kind of right of the IP in Thailand. I think that's also a good exercise, and just to know that the status of the implementation of the UN DRIP. But when how to link with the NDC, actually the INDC, the one that the government submitted to the UNFCCC. For the Thailand NDC, actually, they focus more on the like energy sector. Not yet just focus looking at the other issues like forestry issues, kind of thing. That there's still, that's we have to monitor. And actually, we have another side event on Thursday at the IP Pavilion. We were talking about the NDC. So if you'd like to exchange and discuss more, please feel free to come. It's from 6 to 5 on Thursday. Thank you.
I think there was also a question on traditional knowledge research, if anyone wants to respond to.
Thank you for all the questions. Yes, we consider forest has a life, water has a life. So water, source of water and forest, we don't pollute, and in certain period of time we don't touch them briefly. We can talk about this later. And the second about the traditional knowledge in science, how do we consider it? Our demand is to take on account of those kind of traditional knowledge together with the so-called scientific knowledge and take it further together. And the UN DRIP, Nepal has voted for UNDRIP, but the implementation part is very, very weak when it links with or it comes to nationally determined contribution, or it was before intended nationally determined contribution. We see very, very low reflection of UNDRIP into it. Tell you the stories, but we have very short time. So in partnership with Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact and International Work Group on Indigenous Peoples, IWGIA, we call IWGIA, we have been working for many years for the rights of indigenous peoples. That also includes implementing UNDRIP in climate change action. Thank you.
Well, my additional will be very limited because I think my colleagues are already to questions. One is really on the science and traditional knowledge. We are not proposing for scientists really to carry some studies among indigenous people, but what we are saying is our traditional knowledge and practices need to be bring together with science, and therefore the application of both will generally will no doubt create a good environment for adaptation and mitigation of climate change. Take an example, for example, where we come from, both in West Africa, North Africa, Eastern Africa, among the pastoralists. The issue of mobility is a science on its own. For us to move from one area to another, depending on the season, it is a science, so to speak. It's a question of how do you acknowledge that, mix with the modern science on how you monitor climate. And I believe that knowledge will be more interesting for both scientific society, modern scientific society, and traditional knowledge community. The second on the issue of to do with the United Nations Declaration on the Right of Indigenous Peoples. Of course, it was a struggle during the adoption, and again, it's a struggle during the application and implementation. As Edward put it, only Congo has already passed a law for indigenous peoples, even though they are not implementing. And that's unfortunate. We may also have a Paris Agreement, but it's not beneficial to anybody unless it's going to be implemented. The same case applies with the UNDRIP. It's not being applied by many countries. But it doesn't mean indigenous peoples are not applying the principles or the declaration of their own, even without the government support. The example, where even though the government never voted in the declaration, either against or in favor, it is interesting because the first country in Africa to develop what we call AIPP guidelines, AIPP national guidelines, and I think it's a very interesting development. AIPP national guidelines means for the government, for any programs to be undertaken, it must be subjected to the AIPP guidelines. We are here to test the guidelines. People are here to understand the guidelines. We are yet basically to ensure everybody understands the guidelines. Step toward the right direction. It was a struggle by indigenous peoples to push the government for the implementation of the declaration. And when the government opened a door for us for dialogue, what we wanted was application of AIPP. That was critical for us. Because we have been displaced, a lot of mining activities are going on, and we felt that prior informed consent of any major development activity must be obtained by those who are carrying out. And that's how the Ministry of Environment and Indigenous Peoples, together UNDP and many players, develop AIPP guidelines. We are here to test, but I think that is a very interesting development as far as UNDP is concerned from African perspective. Thank you.
Pour la question sur les États de l'Afrique du Nord ou de l'Afrique en général, tout d'abord, nous avons le problème de non-reconnaissance des peuples autochtones. exemple, l'Algérie ne reconnaît pas que les Amazirs sont les peuples autochtones de l'Algérie.
In North Africa, we have the problem of recognition of indigenous people. For example, in Algeria, the government doesn't recognize the Amazigh as indigenous people.
Et même s'ils signent, ils ont signé et ratifié toutes les conventions, signé l'accord de Paris, mais dans la réalité, il n'y a aucune application.
And even if they have signed all the treaties and the Paris Agreement, there is no real implementation.
Je vous donne l'exemple depuis l'accord de Paris, en Kabylie, par exemple, en Algérie, des milliers d'arbres fruitiers ont été brûlés par l'armée algérienne dans le cadre de la lutte antiterroriste.
For example, in Kabylie, Algeria, thousands of trees have been burned down during the war against terrorism.
Le problème des terres collectives au Maroc, en Algérie ou en Tunisie, les États, la législation nationale ne reconnaissent plus les terres collectives. Ces terres collectives qui appartiennent aux peuples autochtones.
For example, in many of our countries, the state doesn't recognize tribal lands that to indigenous people.
En plus, au Maroc, la spoliation des terres des paysans amazirs marocains, ça se fait quotidiennement et dans l'impunité totale.
For example, in Morocco, spoliation from Moroccan peasants is something done daily.
Et par exemple, depuis l'accord de Paris, qu'est-ce qui a été fait au Maroc par rapport à la question de la mine d'Imida, où 5 villages sont en grève et en sit-in depuis 5 ans?
For example, what has been done in Morocco for the Imider mine? 5 villages are in comment dire? They are making a sit-in against the government because of the problem of water.
Et depuis toujours, ça a été le même cas en Afrique du Nord. Les gouvernements, au niveau des réunions internationales, s'engagent, ils signent et ratifient, mais quand ils reviennent dans leur propre pays, leurs pratiques et la législation nationale, ils n'ont jamais été adoptés aux conventions et aux pactes qu'ils ont ratifiés.
This has been a problem throughout the years. Our governments ratify all treaties, but when they come back, they don't implement all these agreements in the national legislation.
Pour la question sur la science et les savoirs traditionnels, nous aussi, nous les autochtones, nous avons nos savoirs, nous avons nos connaisseurs. Et on veut que, justement, nos connaisseurs et nos savants travaillent avec les scientifiques pour trouver ensemble les solutions pour les changements climatiques.
We as indigenous people, we have our knowledge and our scientists, and we want to work with formal science to find solutions to climate change.
Et je termine par vous inviter le 11 à une manifestation qui aura lieu devant la COP, la manifestation des tombeaux, organisée par de l'Amérique centrale, le COICA de l'Amérique du Sud, APMM, Association de population de montagne du monde, et le Congrès mondial amazigh. Merci.
And I finish by inviting you this Friday. We will have demonstrations, the drums of the people, this Friday 11, with organizations from Central America, South America, the Mountain People Association, and the World Council of Amazigh Peoples.
Thank you very much. Our time is up. Thank you very much, all the speakers, for your excellent presentations and for all of you for coming. I would like to also make you aware of publications in the back of the room, which could be interesting for you if you're interested in indigenous peoples and climate change. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Okay. Thank you.